Hi, friends. Welcome to the By Faith podcast. I'm your host, Christine Hoover, and I'm so glad you're here. Each week this season, I'm talking with a guest about how they're using their unique gifts and talents in their specific context and season of life. My prayer for you is that by listening, you'll be encouraged, challenged, and equipped to step out by faith using your particular gifts for God's glory. Friends, I'm creating much more than this podcast. I do a little microblogging on Instagram, actual blogging on my website, and I have a few books I've put out into the world. And in fact, I recently turned in my manuscript for my 5th book, releasing next spring. And I would love for you to follow along with me so you can hear more about it when the time comes. You can find me on Instagram at ChristineHoover98 and all the books and all the things at my home online, gracecoversme.com. I want to thank my sponsor for today's episode, The Good Book Company, publisher of Goodbye to Goodbyes, the latest addition to their beautifully illustrated award-winning Bible storybooks for children. In this vivid, moving, and exciting retelling of the story of Lazarus, Lauren Chandler helps children understand that Jesus came to say goodbye to goodbyes forever. For more information about Goodbye to Goodbyes, go to thegoodbook.com. Today, I am honored to have Anna Perez as my guest on By Faith. Anna is married to Rich, and together they planted Christ Crucified Fellowship in New York City in 2012. They also have 2 kids, and Anna has recently gone back to work full-time, which we talk about in the episode today. You're going to hear about their church planting journey in our conversation and the many things Anna has learned along the way. Things like how she's moved from comparison and trying to fit into a cookie-cutter formula of, well, this is what I'm supposed to do as a pastor's wife, to learning how to discern what God would have her to do specifically in their family and their church. Anna shares how she's learning to rest, how she's managing that transition from working at home to working outside the home, how she's finding joy in church planting, and how she's come to see God's calling on their lives isn't just Rich's calling, but is hers as well. Guys, it's a good one. So let's just get right down to it. Here, friends, is my conversation with Anna Perez. Thanks so much for making the time for this today. I'm excited to get to talk to you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so glad that we got the chance to do this. I'm excited. I'm grateful. Yeah.
Good. Well, it comes at the end of a work day, which I normally do these during the day, but I could grab you at the end of the day because you're working, right? So where are you working?
I work at the school that we currently meet at as a church, and I'm part of the HR team. So I work in human resources, and I get to every day just work with teachers and support them. And now this is a relatively new role. I just went back into the work field after being a stay-at-home mom for about 7 years.
Okay.
So this is about like 6 months in.
Okay. So do you have background in education, or they just wanted you at the school based upon?
We just have a really good relationship with the school since, we use their space. I mean, the founder of the school is a member of our church. We have lots of teachers that are in there. So I don't necessarily have a background in education, but it was more so just entering in through the admin piece of it. And just, through partnerships throughout the years, we just built a really great relationship with the school. So
has your church always been meeting in that school?
No. So our church's journey has also been an interesting one because, being in New York City, we're in Manhattan, right? So we're on the island of Manhattan. And so we've had our fair share of variety. I mean, I feel like we all started in the living room, right? And
y'all did?
So we did start in the living room.
That's what we did too.
Yeah, that's the kind of, usually the first base. And then after that, we spent a good 2 years in a boxing gym, which was really exciting. Really, really exciting start.
Really? Or you loved it? Your face is like, I loved it.
Oh, well, it was exciting because it's the beginning, right? So in the beginning, it's just like, oh, this is really cool. It's a boxing gym. I think that those were some really formative years, though, yes, it's sweaty, it's smelly. There's a lot of manpower. You have to be moving like the punching bags and the weights. You walk in and there's like spit buckets and then blood in the bathroom. So there's just so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were grateful. We were grateful because we didn't have anywhere else to go. So we did a boxing gym. Then we met at a church for some time, then a synagogue, then a school for a brief moment, and then where we are now.
So what year did y'all start the church?
We launched in 2012.
Okay. But have you been in the city longer than that, or were you, so I really don't know anything about y'all's start. Did you move to the city to start the church, or were you already living there?
No, yeah. So I'm not originally from New York, but my husband is. So my husband, Rich, was born and raised in the very community that we're in. I mean, I'm talking, we live 2 blocks from his childhood apartment, like that close.
Okay.
So we live in we raise our kids here. He gets to just, have his family where he grew up. So he's been here his whole life. After we got married, we just, felt the call to ministry. And after having just a brief time away, just out in the middle of nowhere after we got married, we knew that we always wanted to come back and do work in the city. So 3 years after we got married, we just settled right in the very community that we always knew that we would be in. And we've been here ever since. So I'd say that was back in like 2010. 2010, we settled in New York. And then 2 years later, we launched church.
So are you living on Manhattan and your church is there? Or do you live, so he grew up in Manhattan. Okay.
Yeah. So he grew up in Manhattan. We are the northernmost community of Manhattan. So if you're looking at the island, Times Square and all of that is all the way down here. And we are all the way up there. Mm-hmm. So we're all the way uptown Manhattan. We live in the very community. Our church is a 10-minute walk from our apartment. So it's very local, very local.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. So do you love living in the city, or there have to be hard things about just city life, especially with kids and the price of living, the cost of living there?
Oh, I mean, I love it. I mean, I think everywhere you go, I mean, wherever you are, there are days that you love it, and then there are days that the grass is definitely greener on the other side, right? So having grown up in New Jersey, my context was a little bit different, but I really do love being here. This has just become a place that I would call home, and I wouldn't think anything differently. Raising our 2 kids. So my children, I have a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. So we have 2 kids, and raising them here, I just feel like it's great. It works. I mean, New York City is great for kids. I think sometimes people may have different perceptions of like whether it's the craziness or whether they think it's dangerous or all of these things. And I mean, I'm really grateful that we get to live in a place where our children are, this is their normal, right? Diversity and life and museums and parks and bricks and subways. And, this isn't anything that they think twice about. So we really do love raising our kids. And I think that just being in the community that my husband was raised in and just like making our home here, it just adds like that element of sweetness to it. So.
Yeah. Cause I bet he still knows a lot of people from growing up. Is that true? A lot of people stay.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. There's still a lot. I mean, the community is changing. I think, there's so much change that happens, but there's still that base of people that stick around. So it's great. We love it here.
So what stage is the church in? How would you characterize your church right now, where it's at? 7 years in.
That's such a good question. So 7 years in, I mean, I really do. So my daughter, like I said, she's 6, and she was born a month after we launched. Okay. So my daughter and the church are like right there.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting because I look at our church and I look at my daughter, 7 years old, right? And so much happens in those early years, right? You go from being born to walking and talking and reading and all of these things. So much is happening, and you think, oh my gosh, so much has happened, but there's still so much. There's so much life ahead.
Right.
And that's how I see our church. So like I said, we're turning 7, and where we are right now, I feel like we are growing into who we are. Like, there are elements, the values that we hold true, and the mission has always been the same. But I feel like just as, we've gone through transitions and things like that, I feel like we are growing into who we are and where we desire to be. So, I feel like for us, so much has happened in these past 7 years, but our people are becoming more empowered. There's more ownership. We're entering a season of like great joy.
Oh, I love that.
And for me, and this is just, something that I've been telling, our people, is just like, this year, I feel like I'm just entering it with such joy, and it's like an expectant joy. I think that's what it is, right? So I feel like this joy is very specific in that I am expecting really amazing things. And I mean, a lot of that is just, through our people and what God has done in them and through them, and how we've just really come together as a church to really kind of enter a new level. So
I love that. I love when I get to talk to church planners' wives or pastors' wives who say things like that, who are finding the joy in it and embracing and passionate about what they're doing, that it's not just their husband's role, but they see their own place in it. I would love to know from you what you are passionate about, and what is your role? What do you see within the church that God has you there for?
That's a really good question. When it comes to the things that I'm passionate about and the roles that I've maneuvered throughout the years, it's interesting because one thing that I've learned is God has really worked out, just even through role and what I'm passionate about, worked out my obedience. And what I mean by that is that early on when we first planted, I had a newborn baby and a 3-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that I was passionate about, or the things that I was able to do, were limited just based on the current season that I was in. Right. And that, that's not good. That's not bad. It's just, the reality of what it is. Right. So my involvement in the very beginning, probably, I wouldn't say it looked like what I thought it would. So I laid low. I laid back, and the primary thing that I was passionate about early on is just ensuring that my family was okay.
Yeah.
Just ensuring that, my husband had a haven to come home to, right? That there was stability in our lives with a newborn and a 3-year-old son in the midst of, core group meetings and Bible studies and services and things, right? And I took that on with great pride, because, there were moments that I was just like, man, but I feel like I could be doing so much more and contributing in this way, not realizing that this is a beautiful contribution in itself, right? Mm-hmm. So during that time, I feel like that's where I just felt really passionate about, like, loving my family well, because it was a lot of hard work. And then seasons change, right? And then my children became old enough to, and being a stay-at-home mom, then after that, my kids became old enough to enter school. So now they're both in school. They go to public school. And, I was free. Like, I had free time, right? So, then in that, I just felt like the tug to really serve my church just in a more hands-on way. So I really became, helped more administratively and operationally. And I was just really passionate about making sure that I was just in the details. My husband is like high vision and just like wanting to just, have these plans and all of these things. And he just needed somebody to just help with the
details.
The details. Right. Yeah. Right. So in that season, I just, God just made it a way that we worked together very closely in a way that we'd never worked together before. So yeah, I took on a lot of like logistics and administration for the church in a time that I feel like just was needed. Yeah. And just helped set some things in place. But then again, and that was for a season because, just realizing, working together like all the time, there was, it's just like, oh, wow, we are talking about church a lot.
A lot. Yes.
A lot. And there's no, I started to feel like there was really no clear divide of where church ended and our friendship and our marriage began.
Right. I can relate.
And that was something that I said, okay, well, this was good for a time, but we need to not do this anymore. Yes. I loved him too much to not work with him. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was a time that I just felt like the timing came to an end, where then there was just a young woman that, just stepped up and just took over that, and it was just really seamless. And now, you know, in addition to working outside of the home, God has really now opened my heart up to now my presence in the church, my voice being different. And what I mean by that is, whereas in the past my voice was, you know, more administrative or more logistic, like now I feel like I'm coming into my own voice as a shepherd. So like shepherding voice and like loving and caring for people in this specific way. And just like coming alongside my husband and just loving our church, loving our people, and just being a different presence. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by just God really shaping my obedience through all of this is, you know, there were times in the beginning that I was like, no, I really feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, mm-hmm. right? Like we just put we have these presuppositions of like yes. what the pastor's, like the job description of what it is. And I was so wrapped up in that in the beginning. And I really felt like I was supposed to do a certain thing, comparing myself to like, say, others that are doing those things, but their context or their circumstance may not even necessarily mirror mine.
Right.
So that took a lot of undoing. But I think one of the things that I really was grateful to God throughout this whole thing was sitting back and listening, right, to what he would have for me in a particular time, but then being so inclined to his voice that when he would say, okay, go do this, then I would go and I would be ready, right? And that's really given me a lot of joy, just to know that there really is no cookie cutter formula for this. Mm-hmm. And I mean, 7 years later, I'm glad I got it now. Then who knows, like, right? But, and this is like, when it comes to just like the men and women in our church, and even particularly women in ministry that sometimes feel bound by just, man, because I remember the prayers of my heart sometimes early on would be like, God, just tell me what it is that I'm supposed to do and I'll just do it. Like lay out that job description for me. But just coming to grips with thinking, man, if I love Jesus most and I love my family well, then there is so much freedom to live that out in my day-to-day and in my ministry and in my church. And then that frees me up to do that in however it looks.
Yeah. Oh, you are, I mean, I just want to like praise the Lord, praise the hands are going up, because I just feel like I need to hear that, but pastors wives need to hear it, but everyone needs to hear that. There's not a formula and we can't mess it up. God loves us and we have his spirit within us. He will lead us in ways to fulfill the good works he has planned for us. So we can just rest in that, but that's hard to do. That's hard to do.
For sure.
We all have that mold in our head, whether it's to be this certain mom or this employee or this pastor's wife. We all have an idea of what that is. It's really hard to live in freedom in that. So I would love to know, how did you get to that point? Were there truths that really God taught you that helped you to embrace the freedom of that rather than the mold that you thought you had to fit?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily could pinpoint this one point. I really do think that along the way, I started to see I started to realize, you know, what led me to this path of like clinging on to this job description. Like, why did I hold on to that so much? And a lot of it, honestly, really just came out of like the lie of comparison. If I'm just really honest, right? Like, I think that at the end of the day, that was really where it was just like born out of. And social media certainly doesn't help, right? Yeah. You know, you know, there's just a whole other world out there that just shows you the highlight reel without seeing any of the behind the scenes of how they get there. But, you know, as I'm thinking about that, I'm just like, man, I do myself a huge disservice when and just feed into the lie of like thinking I should be at a certain place or holding or thinking I'm supposed to be doing a certain thing when I'm holding someone else or something else at the standard. So I think that when we compare ourselves, we are saying that thing is the standard, and we give that thing or whatever, like the power to really define what we should be doing, as opposed to looking at the one who in all things are satisfied, right? Like in all things, we can just find contentment and satisfaction. And, you know, that was just like along the way, I just realized like, man, it's very exhausting trying to like keep up with, I don't know, a certain expectation that doesn't really exist.
Absolutely. And just to think about this vastly different context that we're talking about. If I tried to be you in New York City and you tried to be me in Charlottesville, Virginia, we are in two totally different contexts and families, and our kids have different needs, and our husbands are different, and the way they pastor is different, and everything is so different. And I think we all have a very unique gifting, calling, context that comparison, it just doesn't translate. In God's economy, it doesn't translate.
Right. It's interesting that we do that though. Sometimes like we just we think we can transcend context and it's all the same. And it's like, thank God that it isn't. Right. Thank God that it isn't, that there is diversity of experience and context and circumstance. Like, man, because how much more of a blessing can we be to the world, to show like the wide spectrum of what God can do, right? Because God is not bound or limited to one experience, right? But in all of our like multiple experiences and locations and all of that, like there's this huge spectrum. And when the body, when we do it faithfully, right, man, like I just think that it's such a picture to the world, like, man, look at what God can do here. Right. Look at all that he is.
Yeah. And we're all doing our part faithfully. We are reaching different people through our different gifts and contexts. I just, my husband met a couple this week that were from East Asia, and they had to leave their country, and now they're planning a church in a city in Virginia to reach their nationality people who have moved there and are going to school there. And their idea, they know the culture, and so they know how to reach them. And it blew my mind to think I would have never thought of that. I would have never known that group of people lived there. I would have never known that how to reach that specific culture in that way. And it just encouraged me so much that God's people in all places are, as they're faithful, we're all working together and reaching people that I couldn't reach your context. And I'm sure that we could figure it out, but there's just, I love the uniqueness of that. It kind of gets me fired up to think about, like, I just have to do, God is just asking me to do my part in my one little corner of where he's planted me, and just be faithful with that. And Anna's doing her part, and I love thinking about the big picture of it all. It's beautiful. So
it is. It really is.
I would love to hear what challenges, though, you faced in transitioning from being a stay-at-home mom to a working mom. And now I would imagine a lot of your service, quote unquote service, I mean, you are doing a lot in your church, as you just talked about, and that has looked different than years past, but now you're interacting mostly with people at work during the day. And so tell us about that. How has that transition been? What are you learning?
So that transition has been good for the most part, I'd say. One of the things that I feel like, for me has always been something that I've tried to manage is just, managing the time and the boundaries that exist between like home, marriage, family, ministry, and now work. Right. So I think, you're right. There's just, different things in the mix. And I think that, that is something that I've desired to, it's been a couple of months in, right? And I think that it was a slow start in the beginning, just trying to get our bearings. But it's made us long for one another more, at the end of the day. That's one thing that I'll say.
You're talking about you and your husband, right?
Well, me and my husband, but just even our family as a whole, because we're, my husband is here, my kids are in two different schools. So the four of us are in just all different places. So I think in one way it's made us like all long for one another, to just come together at the end of the day. Whereas in the past, where we would just spend, say, like longer periods of time together, it's like, all right, here's dinner, or all these things. But so it's done that. I think that, when it comes to balancing like the work life and the personal life, I think that one of the things that we've just been really mindful of is just like intersecting more instead of like adding things. So,
Okay. Yeah.
so just like when it comes to our evenings, we've just tried to do our best to, to each night of the week has a thing, whether it's, one night is we invite people and we get to just like be hospitable and welcome people into our home. Another night, is just family night. And that's just like, no exceptions. This is where we spend together. Where another night we're going to see someone or we're spending some time outside of the home. But we've really tried to like protect those times. But when it comes to intersecting our time, it's because we honestly can't afford to add anything else to the calendar, right? There's just way too many things, especially, as the kids grow and they have their own things that they want to be a part of. So, I mean, one thing that we've really just tried to manage is just inviting people into what we already have going on.
Yeah.
So whether it's a dinner or a practice or a game, if it's just, people that we want to spend time with or people that just really want to, join into the family, it's like, well, Josiah has a basketball game tonight and it's at 7 and it's here. Would you just want to come with us and just, sit on the sidelines and just watch and we can talk there? Or if it's or another opportunity is like, hey, if I'm doing laundry across the street and, one of the ladies just want to join in and just help me wait while I'm just waiting for my clothes to wash, right? Mm-hmm. Those are opportunities that we get to take. And we really, sometimes it's good for our family to have that time, but a lot of the time we just really love that we can just be even like a little bit strategic as far as just inviting people to what we already have going.
That's great. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get tired?
Oh, all the time. Yes.
I'm kind of tired thinking about all that, but I mean, I get tired in my own life too, but I always think, is everybody as tired as I am? Because I just feel tired all the time.
I'm so glad that you said that. Yes, I'm tired.
Yes.
And it's okay. Yeah. And it's totally okay to say that. I think that there is this element of self-care that is super important to also be able to know when to stop, when to rest, when to Sabbath, and that it's okay to think about caring for yourself.
Yeah. So how are you doing that?
Well, how are we doing that? So every week, Friday at 6 p.m., the world stops for all of us. So what we do is we do like a 24-hour Sabbath. So from Friday at 6 to Saturday at 6, we just rest or we just hang or we'll do, whatever.
Something fun.
Yeah, something fun. And I'm trying to get better at that because at times I would try to like sneak errands in and just try to do things that it's just like I didn't get a chance, but I'm working on it. But no, during that time, we really just kind of like turn off the world and just spend time with one another. But, we just love spending time with people. We do that. But I think that in my home, I am the only introvert. So I'm an introvert surrounded by 3 extroverts. And that is a challenge in itself. But, I think I'm grateful because they pushed me sometimes to be able to just, embrace the world. And then at times I serve as a balance to be able to say, guys, we just need some time for it to just be the 4 of us. And it works.
Yeah. So, I'd love to talk about how everything you're saying, I just hear the partnership that you have with your husband. And would you say that the call to ministry, the call that you share that with him?
That's a really good question. So Rich is my longest friend. He's my greatest friend. When it came to the call to ministry, I have to say that early on, I saw it as something that he was called for, and I was along for the ride, if I could be honest.
Yeah.
So, I think the call in his life, I feel like came very early. It came like 2 years into our dating relationship. So we were just like 19, 20, and the calling on his life was very clear to all of those around him. So I realized in that moment that when it was just kind of like, all right, this is what I want to do with my life. I thought, well, my life is definitely not going to be normal. I don't know what this is going to mean, but I'm down. And that's honestly how I would describe like entering ministry. Like, I don't know what this means. I do know my life won't be normal, but I'm game.
Yeah.
So along the way, Man, I think along the way I really wrestled with thinking, did I miss my call? Like, did I miss the memo? Like, was God super clear with what Rich was supposed to do, and then I just maybe, I don't know, I didn't get one.
Yeah.
So early on, I'd say it was a little confusing for me because everything just happened so fast.
Yeah.
We planted and people came and we had services and Sundays and week to week and, just kind of like that to support and sustain. And along the way, I really honestly, I felt confused, not knowing if there was something that was specific for me or if that me being a part of this was just what was my call.
Yeah.
And man, I will say that through prayer and just asking questions and even just like talking this out with Rich and just like, people that I trust, I realized along the way that God didn't forget me, right? That I didn't miss the memo and I didn't miss, what he may or may not have like said. But in this whole journey, he also has a place for me in ministry, right? He also had a plan and also has a place. So to answer, to like make a long answer short, like, yes, I do feel like a partner in this ministry. And yes, I do love where God has us. I feel like along the way, God has been revealing more specifically things that he desires for me. And that's just something that as the seasons go, I'm really like looking forward to acting on those. But yeah, I do feel like this is also mine. I feel like I don't feel like the default or the attachment, but I do also feel like, no, God, just in your sovereignty, you had us together, right? Mm-hmm. In your sovereignty, you brought us together to this call. So I really do. I really love where I am. And sometimes I look at God and I'm like, man, I can't believe you did this. Like I can't,
yeah,
because at least for me, I didn't grow up in the church. I wanted nothing to do with God. I wanted nothing. Like if you spoke to me about Jesus, I got very uncomfortable and tried to change the subject fast. So for me, I have moments now where I'm like, wow, there is no way I can't believe that you are real. Like to change my life and to bring me from where I was to where I am now. It wouldn't make sense. Doesn't make sense if God weren't real.
So how did you become a Christian?
So it was through my friend Rich, like at the time,
your friend Rich. Yeah.
My then friend Rich, right. And his family, like just, for a while, he invited me to church and poor guy, I lied to him every time that I had something to do. But like, he was kind and he was gentle. And I'm sure he knew that I was lying, but one thing I appreciated about him was that even in his invitation, and in my just time and time rejection, like he was always gracious and always understanding. Mm-hmm. Like he didn't push. I think he just waited. Mm-hmm. He waited for God to do what he needed to do. So yeah, it was just through, there was like a little devotional time that I was invited, not a little devotional, but it was a devotional time that I was invited to be a part of. And I just remember sitting in a room, it was just like 3 or 4 other people, and they were talking about Jesus and they were reading the Bible and they were so excited. Mm. And it wasn't necessarily that they were excited. It was just that they were talking about, they were in Romans 12. Oh, I'll never forget it. But they were talking about the scriptures and Jesus in a way that was like just relevant to what was going on now, as if they had read a news article and they were talking about very real things. Yeah. And I remember thinking, wow, like these guys are so excited and they have this really interesting joy that I want. I want that. I want that for my life. I can't leave here without it. And that night I just, I never looked back.
That's amazing.
It's just really incredible to see what God can do with someone. Like when God has a plan and when God has a will, there's just good luck trying to run from it, because he will always make it happen and always make a way.
Which dovetails really with what we were talking about earlier, that whatever God's plan for you is, he's going to make it so clear and obvious that you can't get away from it. Like he has a plan for how he wants us to serve him, and he'll make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Those things that he's implanted in us, he will rise to the surface and match that with opportunities. At least that's how I've experienced him. So
Yeah.
Earlier when you said you have things that, I forgot how you put it. It was like, there are things almost like I heard it as a dream, or things that you want to see happen that you hope to get to do. What are those things?
I'll just say I have a heart for the woman in ministry. Whether she is a planting wife, whether she's a pastor's wife, whether she is leading a ministry, like I have a huge heart for women in ministry. I think even particularly church planting wives,
mm-hmm.
only because, early on, I wrestled with so much and I felt confused often and lonely a lot.
Me too.
And just 7 years in this is by no means a lot, but it's something, right? Just having that, having been doing this for 7 years, but I feel like, when your parents say, when you grow up and your parents say, like, I want to work to give you the things that I never had.
Yes.
Right? That phrase. I think as I grow in my years and in, looking ahead in life, like, I want to work and serve to give women, church planting wives, women in ministry, what I didn't have early on in those first days, because I have just such a heart. There's just something there that I know God is trying to say.
Well,
and I'm listening.
You have my support, full support. I agree with you. I was desperate for help and resources whenever we started church planting. And I wrote a book for a church planter's wife, but it still sits all alone with no friends sitting around. Like, there's not much out there for the wives. So I don't know if you're talking about writing. I don't know what you're referring to, but I am in full support. We need more things for wives of church planters and pastors' wives. And I'm passionate about that as well. So I just think anybody who is passionate about that, go for it. I hope that God will open those doors for you, however you want to pursue that. But that's really exciting. So, well, can you tell us, just kind of closing us out with, what are some of the things that you've learned about what it means to serve God?
I think one of the things that I've learned to serve God is being confronted with the pursuit of being faithful, and then with being, let's say, successful, and choosing faithful every time. I want, like, if there's anything that just along the years, I come back to, and just the common theme of it all. I mean, it could go in different directions, right? Like comparison in ministry, contentment with your context and where you are, and whether it's your location or your home or our apartment, or our church doesn't have a building, or, it could go in so many ways, all of the wrestles that come when we are in ministry, right? But I think time and time again, home base for me will always be the idea of faithfulness, whether it's how I lead my people, how we lead our church. I really want to come like face to face with our Savior and just hear those words, right? He doesn't say, well done, good and successful servant, good and accomplished servant, right? Like, he will say, well done, good and faithful servant. And that is where I really desire to be. So when it comes to service, serving in ministry all these years, there is so much that we can profess to have or not have, but the desire of my heart, in times where I haven't gotten it right, or in times that maybe we really missed the mark, I want to be inclined in such a way that I just move in being faithful to who God says, believing in who God says that I am, right? That I am his and his alone, his daughter, right? That I am the daughter of a king, right? An heir. I want to be faithful in believing that the promises that he gives us in his word are true, that they are for you and me. I want to be faithful in loving well. There's just, so many portions of scripture that teach us how to love well and how to be faithful in our love to others, and how to speak, how to pray for those, how to show kindness and sacrifice. So along the way, again, we've missed the mark and we haven't gotten it right all the time. But out of all of that, what's risen from the ashes is just every morning more and more the desire to just choose faithfulness every time.
That is so good. I want to keep talking to you for hours and hours because this is just encouraging to me. You have a lot of wisdom. God has given you a lot of wisdom, and He's given you a lot of joy. I just love that you're exuding a joy in what you do that is attractive and magnetic. And I can see why God has put you with with Rich and where y'all are. And I trust that He's using y'all powerfully there. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And I know that people listening are going to be so blessed by what you have said. So thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much, Christine. I really am grateful for this opportunity and this time.
Friends, thank you so much for listening to By Faith. It is such a joy for me personally to have these kinds of conversations, but I also love sharing them with you and creating this podcast for you. If you're encouraged or helped in some way by listening, I would love for you to share this podcast with a friend or leave a review. Thank you in advance for doing that. Please join me next week as I talk with Carolyn McCauley. Carolyn is the author of The Measure of Success, Uncovering the Biblical Perspective on Women, Work, and the Home. And in our conversation, we talk about women and work. We also talk about singleness and the church, and Carolyn provides such a great perspective that we all, whether married or single, will benefit from. So join me next week for that conversation. And until then, friends, have a great week and keep walking forward by faith.